Levi Belfield was born on May 17, 1968, in Walsall, England. He grew up in Slaughter's a working-class household, left school early, and spent his adult life working as a wheel clamper across West London. To the people around him, he came across as charming and sociable. To the women who dated him, the reality was very different: controlling, violent, and deeply dangerous. By 2002, he had already accumulated 9 prior convictions. Nobody outside his immediate circle understood how far that danger truly extended. On February 4, 2003, 19-year-old Marcia McDonnell stepped off the 111 bus near her home in Hampton, London. After a night out with friends, she never made it inside. She was attacked from behind with a heavy blunt object and left on the pavement. She passed away 2 days later in hospital. The offense had no apparent motive. Months later, on August 19, 2004, 22-year-old Amélie Delagrange, a French student studying in England, was found collapsed on Twickenham Green. She had been struck in the same manner. She did not survive. Investigators also connected Belfield to the disappearance of 13-year-old Amanda Millie Dowler, who vanished on March 21, 2002, after leaving Walton-on-Thames railway station. Her remains were discovered 6 months later in Ytlw Heath Woods, Hampshire. He also attempted to take the life of Kate Sheedy, who survived after being run over by his vehicle in May 2004. Belfield was identified after detectives cross-referenced a list of ex-girlfriends compiled during the investigation with registered owners of a white van seen near multiple offenses. His name appeared on both lists. He was arrested at his home in West Drayton in March 2006. At trial, he refused to give evidence. On February 25, 2008, a jury at the Old Bailey convicted him of the offenses against McDonnell, Delagrange, and the attempted offense against Sheedy. He received multiple life sentences. In June 2011, following a separate trial, he was convicted of Millie Dowler's abduction and unlawful passing, earning a further whole life order. Levi Belfield will never be released from a correctional facility. Their relationship had since ended, and she had begun seeing other men. Farrant, possessive and unwilling to accept rejection, began stalking her. On February 7, 1996, he went to her home, demanded sex, and when she resisted, held her face down, underwater in her bathtub, until she passed. He then concealed her body in the attic of her home, stole her car, and fled toward continental Europe. Hoskins' body was discovered by her own 15-year-old daughter when she returned from school, and Fluxian's body was discovered by her own 15-year-old daughter when she returned from school, and Fluxian's body was discovered by her own 15-year-old daughter when she returned from school. International manhunt was launched. Farrant was eventually spotted by a British tourist who recognized him working at a hostel in Nice, France. He was arrested on July 5, 1996, and extradited back to Britain in January 1997 at Winchester Crown Court in January 1998. DNA evidence linking him to both scenes was presented to the jury. He was found guilty on both counts. The judge described the offense as a ruthless, callous, and evil act committed in cold blood, and declared Farrant would never be released. He passed away in HMP Wakefleet on May 3, 2024, at the age of 74, while serving his whole life sentence. Peter William Sutcliffe was born on June 2, 1946, in Bingley, West Yorkshire, into a working-class family. He was quiet and introverted as a child, often bullied at school. He later married Sonia Surma in 1974 and worked for years as a heavy goods vehicle driver. To his neighbors and workmates, he appeared completely ordinary. There was nothing about him that suggested what he was capable of, that made him all the more dangerous. Between 1975 and 1980, Sutcliffe was responsible for the deaths of at least 13 women across Yorkshire and Manchester, and attempted to take the lives of 7 more. His first confirmed offense took place on October 29, 1975, when 28-year-old Wilma McCann was attacked in Leeds. His method was consistent, approaching from behind, striking with a hammer, then continuing the assault. His persons affected came from all walks of life: students, shop workers, and others simply going about their evenings. Authorities and the press dubbed him the Yorkshire Ripper, drawing a direct comparison to the Victorian-era offences of Jack the Ripper. The investigation that followed became one of the largest and most expensive manhunts in British history. 2.5 million police hours, 30,000 statements taken, and 40,000 men interviewed. A hoax. Tapes sent to investigators in 1978 purportedly from the offender carried a Wearside accent and misdirected the case for years. Despite all of this effort, Sutcliffe was questioned by police on 9 separate occasions and released each time without charge. He was finally arrested on January 2, 1981, in Seshfield, after being stopped in a vehicle fitted with false number plates. The following day, a returning officer discovered a concealed hammer, knife, and rope at the scene. Under questioning, Sutcliffe confessed in full, stating, "It was him, the Yorkshire Ripper." He claimed voices had directed him to act, that he believed he was on a divine mission. His trial began on April 29, 1981, at the Old Bailey. The jury rejected his claim of diminished responsibility by a majority of 10-2. On May 22, 1981, Sutcliffe was convicted of 13 offenses and sentenced to 20 concurrent life terms, later upgraded to a whole life order in 2010. Peter Sutcliffe passed away on November 13, 2020, at University Hospital of North Durham, age 74, after contracting COVID-19 and refusing treatment. The family had been shot a combined total of 25 times, many at close range. Police initially concluded that Sheila, who had a history of psychiatric treatment, had carried out the offense before turning the weapon on herself. The case appeared closed. Then, several weeks later, Jeremy's former girlfriend came forward. She told detectives he had spoken openly about his plans, motivated by the prospect of inheriting the family's substantial estate. A silencer, recovered from a gun cupboard 3 days after the offense, was found to carry traces of blood and paint from the scene. Crucially, with the silencer attached, the rifle would have been too long for Sheila to have taken her own life, dismantling the original theory entirely. Jeremy Bamber was charged with 5 counts of unlawful passing. His trial at Chelmsford Crown Court concluded in October 1986. The jury returned a majority guilty verdict of 10-2. He was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years, and formally informed in 1994 that he would never be released. He remains confined at HMP Wakefield, continuing to protest his innocence and pursue legal appeals. The courts have not overturned his conviction. Mark Leonard Bridger was born on November 6, 1965, in Carshalton, Surrey. Over the course of his life, he worked in a variety of roles: abattoir worker, hotel porter, lifeguard, mechanic, and welder, never settling in any one place for long. He relocated to Wales in the 1980s and eventually made his home in the small, quiet village of Ceinws, near Machynlleth, in Pwyl. By 2012, he was 46, living alone in a rural cottage. His neighbors knew him as someone who kept largely to himself. His record showed a string of minor convictions stretching back to the mid-1980s, including assault. He had fathered 6 children by 4 different women and had been married once. Nothing in his public profile suggested what he was about to do. On the evening of October 1, 2012, 5-year-old April Sue Clay, Ann Jones attended swimming lessons at a local leisure center, while her parents were at a school parents' evening in Mauchinleath. Afterward, April and a school friend played outside their housing estate. A witness saw April get into a vehicle after speaking with the driver, a left-hand drive Land Rover Discovery. She was never seen alive again. Her disappearance prompted one of the largest search operations Wales had ever seen, with hundreds of police officers, volunteers, and military personnel combing the surrounding countryside over several days. Bridger was arrested less than 24 hours after April went missing. He matched the description of the driver and owned the vehicle seen by witnesses. Officers searched his cottage in CINWS and found April's blood in multiple locations: on the carpet, on clothing, and near the fireplace. Fragments of bone belonging to a young child were recovered from among the fireplace. Ashes. Her body was never fully recovered. Bridger claimed he had accidentally struck April with his vehicle, and in a state of panic, could not remember what he had done with her body. The forensic evidence, the blood and the bone fragments, told a very different story. His trial opened on April 29, 2013, at MLD Crown Court. On May 30, 2013, the jury found him guilty of abduction, causing April's passing, and perverting the course of justice. The judge described him as a pedophile and a pathological and glib liar. Mark Bridger received a whole life order and will never be released. Anthony John Hardy was born on May 31, 1951, in Burton-upon-Trent, Staffordshire. By most measures, his early life appeared successful. He excelled academically, earned an engineering degree from Imperial College London, managed a large company, married, and had children. The family relocated to Australia for a period, where in 1982 he was arrested for attempting to drown his wife. The charges were dropped. Back in England, his marriage ended in divorce in 1986 following allegations of domestic violence. From that point on, Hardy's life deteriorated steadily. He cycled in and out of psychiatric hospitals across London, diagnosed with bipolar disorder and later treated for alcohol abuse, drug-induced psychosis, and severe depression. He drifted between hostels, accumulating minor convictions. In 1998, a woman accused him of rape. The charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. The pattern was becoming clear, but no one connected the dots. In time. In January 2002, police were called to the block of flats in Royal College Street, Camden, where Hardy lived, after a neighbor reported vandalism. Officers entered and found a locked room. Inside was the naked body of 38-year-old Sally White. A forensic pathologist, who was later struck off the medical register for serious professional errors, concluded she had passed of natural causes. Hardy was released after a brief spell in custody for the vandalism. Months later, he was discharged from a psychiatric hospital after doctors assessed he posed no danger to the public. That assessment was catastrophically wrong. On December 30, 2002, a homeless person searching through rubbish bins near Hardy's building found dismembered human remains wrapped in black plastic bin liners. Further searches uncovered the body parts of two women, 34-year-old Bridget McLennan and 29-year-old Elizabeth Vollard. Both had been brought to Hardy's flat, caused to pass, and then dismembered using a hacksaw and knives recovered at the scene. Blood drag marks on the floor showed how the women's bodies had been moved between rooms. Photographs of the deceased, taken by Hardy and found during the search, left investigators with no doubt about what had occurred. On December 30, 2002, a homeless person searching through rubbish bins near Hardy's building found dismembered human remains wrapped in black plastic bin liners. Further searches uncovered the body parts of two women, 34-year-old Bridget McLennan and 29-year-old Elizabeth Vollard. Both had been brought to Hardy's flat, caused to pass, and then dismembered using a hacksaw and knives recovered at the scene. Blood drag marks on the floor showed how the women's bodies had been moved between rooms. Photographs of the deceased, taken by Hardy and found during the search, left investigators with no doubt about what had occurred. Hardy had fled. Police, knowing he was diabetic and required regular insulin, monitored hospitals. An off-duty officer spotted him. He was found hiding behind bins at Great Ormond Street Hospital in January 2003 and arrested after a violent struggle that left one officer stabbed and another seriously injured. In November 2003, Hardy appeared at the Old Bailey and pleaded guilty to all 3 offenses. He was sentenced to 3 concurrent life terms. In May 2010, a high court judge issued a whole life tariff. Anthony Hardy passed away in HMP Franklin on November 25, 2020, age 69. Colin Pitchfork was born on March 23, 1960, in Newbold Verdon, Leicestershire. He grew up as the middle child of 3 in a quiet village setting. Attended school in Market Bosworth and Desford. Then left in 1976 to begin an apprenticeship at Hampshire's Bakery in Leicester, where he would continue working right up until his arrest years later. He was described by his supervisor as a capable worker, but one who could not leave female employees alone. As early as 1977, at just 17 years of age, he had already been convicted of indecent exposure after targeting a schoolgirl. It was a pattern that would escalate far beyond what anyone around him recognized. On the night of November 21, 1983, 15-year-old Linda Mann was walking along a footpath known as the Black Pad in Narberth, Leicestershire, after visiting a friend. She did not come home. Her body was found the following morning on a nearby embankment. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled. 3 years passed without an arrest. Then, on July 31, 1986, 15-year-old Diaz Diel Ashworth was making her way home through a footpath in Enderby, a village neighboring Narberth. She too did not arrive. Her body was found 2 days later, near 10 Pound Lane. The same pattern, the same area, the same devastating outcome. In a landmark moment for British criminal history, police turned to a new forensic technique developed at the University of Leicester by scientist Alec Jeffreys: DNA profiling. Beginning in January 1987, officers conducted the world's first mass DNA screening, requesting blood samples from over 5,000 men, aged 17 to 34, living across Narberth, Enderby, and Little Thorpe. Pitchfork did not submit his own sample. Instead, he paid a colleague named Ian Kelly £200 to impersonate him using a doctored passport. The deception held until August 1987, when Kelly was overheard in a local pub discussing what he had done. The tip was reported to police on September 18, 1987. The following day, Pitchfork was arrested at his home in Little Thorpe. His DNA was a confirmed match for both offense scenes. Faced with the forensic evidence, Pitchfork confessed to both offenses. His trial was held at Leicester Crown Court, and on January 22, 1988, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 30 years later, reduced to 28 on appeal. He became the first person in the world to be convicted of an offense using DNA profiling. Michael Adebolo was born in Romford, Essex, to Nigerian parents and raised in a Christian household. He was educated and articulate. In 2003, during his first year at the University of Greenwich, he converted to Islam. In the years that followed, he became increasingly radicalized, drawn into the orbit of extremist networks linked to the banned organization. Had previously attempted to travel to Kenya to join militants there, a trip that was disrupted by authorities. The path from conversion to violence was gradual, deliberate, and documented. On the afternoon of May 22, 2013, 25-year-old Fusilier Lee James Rigby, a drummer and machine gunner in the 2nd Battalion, Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, was off duty and walking along Wellington Street in Woolwich, southeast London, toward the Royal Artillery Barracks. He was wearing a camouflaged backpack. Adebolo, acting alongside his accomplice Michael Adebolo, had been waiting. The two men drove a jury, Vaux Altagra, directly at Fusilier Rigby, at speeds of 30 to 40 miles per hour, striking him and knocking him to the pavement. They then got out of the vehicle armed with knives and a meat cleaver and subjected him to a sustained and fatal attack in the middle of the street. They made no attempt to flee. Instead, they waited at the scene, speaking to members of the public who had gathered, justifying what they had done by citing British military actions overseas. Adebolo was filmed on a bystander's phone, his hands covered in blood, delivering a statement. When armed police arrived, both men charged at officers and were shot and wounded before being detained. Both were taken to hospital, then transferred to police custody. Adebolo was charged with the unlawful passing of Fusilier Rigby and 2 counts of attempting to cause the death of a police officer. The trial began at the Old Bailey on November 29, 2013. Adebolo gave evidence, denying the charge on the basis of religious conviction, stating he considered himself a soldier acting under divine instruction. The jury was not persuaded. On December 19, 2013, both men were found guilty of the unlawful passing of Fusilier Rigby. On February 26, 2014, Michael Adebolo was sentenced to a whole life order. He will never be released from a correctional facility.